This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts on the Wire, episode 19. Annie Cushing. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 19 of Experts on the Wire. Today we're chatting about analytics. I wanted to bring an analytics expert on the show because I know there's a ton of misinformation out there about analytics and a lot of maybe incorrect information out there and just a lot to dig through. So it's tough to really know what path to take, what direction to go in. And thankfully, we have Annie Cushing on the show today. She has spent over 10 years mastering, practicing, and teaching all about analytics. So since she teaches this and trains people on how to do analytics, she's very good at explaining things in a simple way. In this episode, she'll teach us all about campaign tagging, how to easily set up dashboards to gather more data and to do better marketing and maybe impress your boss, and also how to fight referral spam and a lot more. So I hope you enjoy today's episode with Annie Cushing. I first want to cover just some basics of analytics. So where does analytics fit into the overall digital marketing landscape?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it. But to answer your question, analytics it really should be titrated into the marketing process all throughout. But I see its most significant roles as kind of the bookends of the marketing workflow. I see it used a lot on the front end to determine, okay, what marketing campaigns should we be focusing on? Where are our opportunities? Where are threats? Those types of things. But then also on the tail end of the campaign, obviously, to measure the impact of that particular campaign or whatever that, big marketing push was. So definitely all throughout, everyone should have their finger on the pulse of what's happening on their site, but much more significantly in the front end of a campaign and the tail end.
Excellent. And so let's imagine a scenario for a moment, like you're maybe a brand new company or you have a brand new website, like you're a brand new e-commerce company. What are some common mistakes or things that people can look out for when setting up their analytics account from the beginning to properly measure things as they move forward?
Yeah, so the two biggest mistakes I see are, one, not customizing their analytics to their particular needs. Like, for example, I work with quite a few publishers and they'll have, like, this is just a common mistake I'll see, or even like new sites that are, like kind of focusing on one particular area. They'll have all of their traffic just funneling into their referrals report or funneling into their social report, or unfortunately, a lot showing up as direct because they're not tagged properly and things like that. But whatever you're really focusing on, wherever you're focusing the majority of your effort, your resources, your money, you should make sure that you have systems set up to track those particular channels even more closely than your other channels. So, for example, going back to the publisher idea, a lot of publishers, they'll have things like syndication agreements with other sites, like your BuzzFeeds, your Yahoo content, and those types of sites, Huffington Post. But all that traffic will just be showing up in their referrals report and will get lost, amidst, the 50,000 other, smaller domains that are in there. And so, I always recommend that people set up customized systems to be able to track what's most important to them. So the biggest mistake, not having their, especially Google Analytics, which is so easy to customize, not taking advantage of those opportunities. Ironically, the second biggest mistake that I see is customizations that are done in kind of a short-sighted manner. So it's very common for someone to read a blog post and say, oh, okay, I read this really cool blog post on how to customize, this particular setting. And they go in and they do it without an understanding of how that's going to impact their data downstream. So when I'm doing analytics audits, I see a lot of issues like that where, someone either set up a campaign tagging system or tweaked some custom setting in Google Analytics, and that person had no idea how it would work their data downstream. So,
can you give an example of like a customized setting? Like say in that example of getting the traffic from like a BuzzFeed or whatnot, like what types of settings in analytics is this? Is this like filters, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I see a lot of problems with filters. I'm glad you mentioned that. Like a common problem I see with filters is that people don't think about, like I draw the analogy, and I have a blog post on this, like keeping the puppy inside the box. So if you think of a visitor to your site as a puppy,
yep.
and the box is like your view, which used to be called profile, but Google always has to rename stuff, to keep everyone on their toes.
Yeah.
And your view is the box. Your goal with your filters is to make sure that that puppy can't jump in and out of the box, and so like a common issue I'll see is, a site will have, 27 different views. And I look at that and I go, oh boy, this is going to be fun. But, they'll have a view set up for each area of their site. And a lot of larger sites will do this because they're thinking this will keep my sampling to a minimum because I won't have as many sessions reporting for that view. The problem is if someone can easily move from one section of your site to another section, then you're going to get a bunch of not sets in your reports, so particularly your campaign reports, like your all pages report and your landing pages report, because that cookie is still being tracked because it's still on your main domain, but that those particular hits are being filtered out by Google Analytics because of the filters you have in place. And so you end up with this very disjointed view of your visitors and what they do on your site. So another example of a setting that gets misused is the default page setting. And I talked with someone, a friend of mine at Google, and said, dude, there should be like flashing lights on this setting. There should be like a giant warning, like, are you sure you want to do this? Because in their tooltip, they even give an example, like, you could put in index.html or it's default.html, one of those two. And I can't tell you how many views I audit where I see index.html because that's what it said in the tooltip.
Yep.
But someone doesn't realize that it's very rare for anyone to need to use that setting. But if you use it, any URL on your site that ends with a / is going to have whatever you put in that box appended to the end, which is going to break all of your URLs. You're going to get all kinds of, miscalculations and stuff. But, that's just another example where someone might have read that in a post specific to an issue where maybe someone has duplication in their main URLs, but not realizing how that's going to impact the rest of their content reports.
Yeah, exactly. And to kind of tie that up and make it concrete for maybe some of the less technical people, to just make it plain and simple, like this messes up your data, and the data is what they're relying on to make good decisions, good business and marketing decisions. And
right.
Yeah, I mean, and so do you have any examples of like a company that was not able to use the data that they had because it was just totally broken? Like any fun examples?
Yeah. So they probably wouldn't think it was fun, but I had my most notable analytics audit to date. It was a fairly large publisher, and I actually met with them in Manhattan. And they had brought in their fourth, I believe it was their fourth SEO consultant in less than 2 years. Wow. But this particular consultant said, you know what, I don't even want, because they had fired the first 3 agencies, she said, I don't even want to touch this until any Cushing looks at your analytics. And so I went in there, and someone had, I guess this developer had read an article about campaign tagging and thought it was such a great idea that he added these campaign tags. And I have a guide. If you don't know what campaign tagging is, just search campaign tagging, and my guide comes up in the first 3 results. And
we'll link to it in the show notes too.
Okay, yeah. It's a massive guide. But so there are just these parameters that you add to the end of your URLs that say things like UTM_medium equals social, and UTM_source equals Facebook.com, et cetera.
Yeah, you're like overriding the default referrer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So you get to tell Google what the referrer is. And so he was so excited about campaign tagging that he added campaign tags on all of their navigation links.
Oh my goodness.
Now, one caveat with campaign tagging is you can't use campaign tags on links on your own site, because then if someone comes from, let's say Google Organic, and they click on a link on your site and you've renamed it, UTM_medium equals top nav, and the source is about us. Now this person no longer came from Google Organic. He or she came from, top nav about us.
Yeah.
And because of the volume of traffic to their site in a single month, I believe they had overwritten 1.6 million sessions.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah. And so it was by far the vast majority of their site, because obviously, even if someone, clicked through to 6 pages, but then clicked on, any navigational element, that traffic would be overwritten. And so with them, this is the first and hopefully last time I've ever had to do this, but I had to tell them, you basically need to declare data bankruptcy. Just trash your account. Well, you already did that, but just scrap it and start over.
Wow.
Yeah. So
when that happens, does everything look like it's a single session or single page visit per session? Like, because every time they click, it triggers a new landing page, or once they're in there, you know what I'm saying? So every time they click on a new internal link, is that triggering a new quote landing page?
Yes.
So yes. They don't have any.
Like a single session could be broken up into 4 sessions.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's just like, it's like playing Monopoly, and just like a return to go, or
Yeah.
So yeah, you just keep resetting the cookie.
Would you say it's better for a company if they really don't know what they're doing, even if they think they know what they're doing, but they don't, to just not mess with it and leave the default Google Analytics and wait till they have an expert to help them?
Yeah, I mean, someone could listen to my answer to this and say, well, she has a horse in this race, which, would be a fair assessment. But I have a waiting list for clients, so I would have no need.
You're not trying to sell something.
Yeah, exactly. But yes and no. So I think, for some of the settings, they're pretty straightforward. And if you read something, I would stick to blogs that are more authoritative in the analytics space. I think where people tend to get themselves into trouble is, and no disrespect to, independent Joe six-pack marketer who, is writing a blog post about something cool he discovered on Google Analytics. But, a blog post like that might be a little riskier.
Yeah.
But I think, if it's written by someone who's, an industry leader in the space, I would probably say, the chances are good that, you're not going to be led down a bad path.
Yeah, and I'll link to a few that I know of in the show notes, including your site, of course, where there's a lot of awesome information that I've referenced myself, which has been helpful.
Yeah, like Lunametrics is a really good one. Yep. Analytics Ninja, does obviously Justin Cutrini's site. So there are some really, really good ones out there.
Yeah, Justin Cutrini, by the way, small tangent, we'll link him in the show notes. People should follow him on Twitter. He went to college right behind my head. You can see my video.
Oh, really?
He went to WPI in Worcester, which is right over there. So
wow.
We had a little connection. But awesome. Yeah, let's jump to dashboards, the topic of dashboards. So I know you love dashboards, and you say that you like to make data sexy. And so why is this important in the business context, and maybe what are some good dashboard rules to follow?
Yeah, so the reason I'm a really big fan of dashboards is I see way too many marketers spending too much time on data collection. So they have these well-worn paths where their boss or their client says, hey, how is that, whatever campaign doing, or how are we doing in organic? And then they go to Google and they find the report, or maybe they've created a custom report, but they keep having to rinse and repeat those same steps. Whereas with a dashboard, you put all of your effort into building out the dashboard, but then the data comes to you using something called APIs. So it's like just hooking up your dashboard to all of these fire hoses of data. So now I'm no longer having to go to Google Analytics and Twitter and my Facebook, page dashboard and all of these different sources. It's all coming to me. And then the important thing is to make sure that the dashboard, one, that it has the KPIs, the key performance indicators, and so basically the metrics that are most important to you and the people you report to. That's a really big one. I think sometimes marketers, they want to show how hard they're working and how busy they are. And so they'll build out these massive dashboards and they'll have metrics that nobody else has any idea what they mean,
right.
Yeah. And so when I'm working with a client, I'll have a dashboard that I use where I get really, really nerdy and, may follow or pull in some metrics that the client might not be concerned about, but they're like early warning indicators to me. So, they're important to me, but they're not important to the client. And so then I take that and I scale down to a dashboard that the client really cares about. So we spend a ton of time, really cultivating like what's most important to them. I'll ask questions like, what things keep you up at night? Where are you putting most of your resources? Like, are there any projects that, are really on the front burner right now? And I'm thinking anything that they tell me that is really pressing and important, that goes closer to the upper left-hand side of the dashboard. Any kind of ancillary things that they want kind of on the back burner, they work their way down to the bottom right corner of the dashboard. And
yeah, and I just want to break down one thing real quick. Sorry to interrupt. To make sure the listeners understand, you're not referring to the dashboard within analytics. You're referring to building your own dashboard that you pull data out of analytics via an API. Right. And then into, so what is this dashboard? Is it an Excel sheet, a Google Doc? What exactly, where does it live?
Yeah, it can be like, I have a dashboard course on how to build them out in Excel. I use Excel for clients who need a lot of customizations. So there are really, really good dashboard tools out there. Mm-hmm. I would say like the simplest would be along the lines of Cyphe, CYFE, to the most complicated being Tableau. I have issues with Tableau. I do like Tableau. It has a high learning curve. I really, really like how sexy it is. My biggest issue is that they are not staying on top of Google Analytics and changes in Google Analytics. Like the last I checked, you still couldn't use the default channel grouping dimension, which is what fuels the ever awesome channels report. and you can't use, I think it's device category, which breaks your traffic into, desktop, tablet, or mobile, and some of these have been around now for the default channel grouping since 2013. Mm-hmm. And so I think especially at its price point, the fact that it's not keeping pace with the changes in Google Analytics is a little inexcusable. And I've talked with their salespeople. I've been referred to different people because they wanted me to do a course on it. And I would love to, but I told them not until they fix this. So then there are, lots of other dash this, lots of different dashboard tools. The only problem is that most of them they really fall short on offering customization options. Yeah. So like in my dashboard course, I used Analytics Canvas. I'm not really I really look forward to the day that I never have to use Excel again for a dashboard.
Really?
Only because it's much more difficult to share with a lot of people. I have to send the dashboards out and, those types of things. And so Excel really isn't keeping pace with, everything else is going to the cloud. And Excel has these really clunky implementations, and Microsoft cannot get Mac and PC to even come close to having the same functionality. So, as long as I'm, building something on a Mac, then, you open it up in PC and something doesn't work, or usually vice versa. That's extremely frustrating. So I do look forward to the day I never have to open Excel again, as much as I love Excel. But you can build a dashboard in Google Sheets. It just doesn't come close to the functionality of Excel. So it just kind of depends on, if you need a lot more customization, then you're going to have to go with a Tableau or Excel. If you want simple, Scythe is probably the simplest dashboard tool I've worked with.
So let me ask two quick follow-ups in that. I guess first of all is this sounds like dashboards are really more for bigger companies, maybe enterprise companies, e-commerce companies. They're probably not for like your sole blogger or even a 5-person company. Like, where do we draw the line between, somebody listening to this going, oh, should I have a dashboard? And put in the effort to do that? Like, should everyone have a dashboard, or is there kind of like a limit to that?
Yeah, I think that actually everyone should have a dashboard. But probably not single bloggers. So like a single blogger, it really depends on how much they're doing in different channels. If you find yourself having to bounce back and forth between, Facebook, Google Analytics, et cetera, et cetera. Most likely what's going to happen is they're just not going to check it very often, because that gets really cumbersome. But, a tool like, I think like the smaller the company, the more they qualify for a really simple and inexpensive tool like Scythe.
Okay.
Like, it's just so simple. And it's like, I don't know, something like $20 a month, to be able to have, and it's very, very user friendly. I'm not an affiliate or anything like that. But it's so user friendly. Like, you just, you create a login, and then it has all these different services, and, and they're like, okay, well, what service? And then you choose the service, and then you add widgets. And when you open up a widget if you create a widget and you say, I want this for Google Analytics, it's going to have just this list of options of really simple reports to choose from. And so it could be really easy to just have like a basic dashboard with like Google Analytics, AdWords, Search Console, and Facebook Insights, something like that. But you could then go to it and have that running in the background in Chrome or, whatever browser you use, and just kind of check in, that maybe on a daily or weekly basis. But you just don't have to think about, all right, well, oh shoot, what's my login for Facebook Insights? How do I get to there? You know, all of that kind of stuff.
So what about for someone that might want a little bit something more robust or custom, like using your course or something, but they're not super technical? How intimidating is it to like use an API and everything? Like, could somebody get your course or read a guide or something and kind of set it up for themselves? And like, how long might something that might that take for them?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of these tools, you know, even like Analytics Canvas, which I used in my course, they connect the API, so you don't have to actually go in and, you know, create like the query URLs. I tried Clipfolio for a while, and one thing I really didn't like, and I've heard that they've changed this a little bit, but like it says like it had a list of services that you could use, but what you didn't know until you actually got into it is that like if you wanted to bring in Facebook Insights data, you had to manually build these API query URLs, which meant, I mean, I did it for Facebook, Twitter, and I believe Pinterest. Pinterest has a very, very stingy API. But I had to go in, and I'm not a developer, and I had to go in and learn like all of the different nuances of these different APIs, you know. So Facebook throttles their API quite a bit. Google Analytics probably has the most generous API out on the market. But Facebook really throttles theirs. And so you would have to like, you know, create multiple, you know, API queries just to be able to get like a continuous historical view. So I think working with, it's not so much the query URLs, that's really not that complicated to understand. It's just all the different parameters, like every source has its own parameters and its own like throttles and stuff like that. So I found it personally very exhausting.
Awesome. So I haven't used dashboards a lot, but I'm going to kind of come up with maybe one use case for a dashboard. Maybe tell me if this is like something that you might use. So we're essentially, the value is the data is being pushed to us, but we're also kind of centralizing everything. So you've got analytics, you've got Facebook, you've got Twitter, you've got all these metrics all in one place. So like in theory, could you build maybe a dashboard that kind of measures content success? And maybe it might show visits, it might show unique visits, it might show tweets, it might show Facebook shares. Is that like one kind of simplified use case of a dashboard?
Yeah, that's a perfect case of a dashboard, because then it's like, you know, your individual efforts are represented in each of your dashboards. So if you're investing in content, you know, like you have bloggers or you have freelancers who you're paying. I mean, really, in my mind, anything you're paying money for, you should have a dashboard, you know?
Right.
Because I want to monitor, I want to see like what's working, what's not, you know, what really, you know, gets traction out on social networks, which can be very, very different from your content that gets traction on, you know, in organic, you know, and things like that. So yeah, I think that's a perfect use case scenario. And
so you could have like a PR dashboard. You could have you could have maybe a business dashboard, like you said, like the things that the business owners care about.
Yeah, because like all of these dashboard tools, they also, you know, connect to tools like Salesforce and different accounting tools and stuff like that. So you could have all of that, MailChimp, you know, like all the different email providers or those who provide an API. You know, if your email provider or the email tool that you're using for your, you know, your email campaigns doesn't provide an API, you need to reconsider that particular tool, because then if they're not providing an API, they're not encouraging you. They want you to be dependent on them. You have to go to their website to get your stats. And anytime I see that, I'm kind of like, phoo, you know.
So you can imagine, just to kind of wrap up the dashboard thing, it sounds like the value here is fast, efficient, convenient access to data very quickly to make decisions and then iterate on what you're doing or measure the value of the things that you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And so then that way, because you're not spending as much time going and culling the data and, collecting it and putting it into one place and building the charts and, all that's taken care of, you can spend more time investigating anomalies and, opportunities and things like that, because now we all only have so many hours in the day. But, when you look at a dashboard and you see, a precipitous spike or precipitous drop or, like a meteoric spike, then your time as a marketer can now be spent investigating that and saying, okay, well, go in and do your SWOT analysis.
Awesome. So I want to shift to something that a lot of people have been asking about, which is referral spam. And maybe you can catch myself and the listeners up to where things are at with this. And so for some quick background, referral spam is when you see what looks like referral traffic from certain sites, but it's fake traffic and it's people trying to get you to visit their site or do some kind of trick. So did analytics release a solution to this, or is there a current solution to referral spam?
Well, that's a really good question. There was an announcement made a couple weeks ago about how supposedly Google has resolved this issue or made strides.
And for context, this is April 27th, 2016. Go ahead.
Yes. And so I don't doubt that they made strides. My concern is there isn't a lot of transparency there to let us know, well, what did you change? And so one of the issues that I have is with Universal, Google provided this bot filtering setting for us. It's in your view settings. So if you go admin and then click on your view and select view settings and you scroll down, you'll see this option for bot filtering. The problem is it's deselected by default. So Google added in this really cool option, but no one knows it's there and you have to select it. It's not a default setting. But I can't imagine someone saying, what the heck, Google, where did all my bot traffic go? Yeah. So that's definitely one thing that, marketers have to go in and they need to make sure they select that. So I was kind of hoping when they made that announcement, like, ta-da, we've taken strides, that would have changed. It hasn't. Another thing that I recommend, and this is going to get a little bit in the weeds, I need to write a blog post on it. And actually, someone did write a blog post. I can't think of his name right now, but I can send you the link. Yeah.
Yep, we'll put it.
But it's called a hostname filter.
Okay.
And what it does is you can go into your hostname report, which you get to by going audience, technology, network, and then change the primary dimension to hostname. And you'll see there a list of all of the domains that essentially have your Google Analytics tracking code on it. And that's where you'll see a lot of the spammy sites, like, all the .ru sites and, xyz.com and, all of these crazy, crazy sites. And so I've seen some people recommend like checking your hostname filter or, pulling lists of known spam sites and excluding them. The problem is they're always iterating, and so I think a much better solution is to look at your host names and decide, okay, which ones do I want to keep? So for me, it's www.analytics.com and analytics.com. And then you can create an include filter that says only include traffic to www.analytics.com or analytics.com. And then you're going to get all of that other junk just filtered out automatically.
Okay,
so I think that's the best solution. And it just works like a charm.
So we'll link to that in the show notes. Thank you for that. And it is a little technical. So the link will have kind of screenshots and stuff. Yep. So speaking of screenshots, I want to shift to a topic of screencasts. because I notice in your kind of tutorials and your content, you use a lot of screencasts and kind of images and things like that. So I imagine this kind of helps you convey your message and provide insights for things that are actionable. Do you actually use screencast for clients as well?
I do a lot. In fact, sometimes if there's anything that's, really complicated or requires a lot of steps and requires a lot of words,
yep.
I just know, even for myself, like if I get an email or some kind of document and I just see a solid wall of text, I'm like, I'll just boomerang that for tomorrow afternoon. And then tomorrow afternoon comes and I boomerang it for, next Tuesday. Because it's just so intimidating.
Yes.
And so I find that, if something is going to require too many screenshots or too many words, I'll just fire up a client's analytics and just talk it through, and it took me a really long time to resolve even doing this, because you don't realize all of the weird nuances in how you talk until you have to listen to yourself. And it is extremely painful. I really didn't realize just how much I sound like a 12-year-old until I had to listen to my voice. And like just weird little things that I'll do. Like if I'm thinking and I'm in the middle of a word, I'll just like drawl out the word until I know what I'm going to say next. And I'm like, what is that? But so I had to overcome that self-consciousness even when I started doing video tutorials. It wasn't my preference, but I just knew, because some of the things that I'm doing in Excel or Google Analytics or whatever is supremely intimidating to people. I just thought, it's going to be easier if they feel like they're just watching over my shoulder than if they're reading a 2,000 word tutorial. But clients absolutely love it. I've even put videos inside my audits at times. Like if something is just, I'm like, you know what, they're not going to get this. And I really, really want them to implement this change. I'll just throw a video in there, and Word allows you to insert videos.
Awesome. Yeah, I fired up Jing. I'm not sure what tool you use, but I fired up Jing at a client meeting right in front of them and made a video, and they were amazed. Yeah. They were like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it communicates like so much care. And lately, I used to just send the MP4, but because YouTube was kind of difficult, like their options were difficult to, like if you made something private, then anyone who wanted to view the video, like their email address had to be included and stuff. But lately, I've rediscovered their, it's not their private setting, it's
unlisted.
Unlisted, yeah. And that's perfect, because then only someone with the URL can see it.
Yep.
So now I typically will use Snagit for like quick videos. If the videos on my site, I record in Snagit and then I pull into Camtasia and clean them up and stuff. But I'll just create a quick video and pop it up on YouTube so that they're not even having to worry about, well, where do I save this video? Do I save this video? Do I delete it? That kind of thing. And so then I'll just send them the URL to the YouTube video that I just use on my personal YouTube. So there's no chance of it getting mixed up in my analytics YouTube videos.
Awesome. I can imagine doing that's probably helped you with speaking and even client calls and being interviewed on podcasts, just having that practice. So one last question. I know you've got to go in a few minutes, and I think you were right that we were definitely ambitious in trying to get a lot of topics in, but I think we hit most of them. Mm-hmm. The last one I wanted to ask about was a little bit more about campaign tagging, and just giving a hypothetical example. I know a lot of people will run Facebook ads and then want to campaign that to track the attribution of that traffic. So what are some tips for maybe somebody in that scenario, like doing a Facebook ad or a Twitter ad or LinkedIn ad and campaign tagging?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked about that, because I am going to write a blog post on this very topic. So typically what people will do if they tag their Facebook paid campaigns at all, or Twitter. I see a lot more Facebook, so I'll just use that as my example. They'll tag it as the medium they'll set to social. The problem is then that paid social is going to show up in the same bucket as their organic social. They're just URLs that they're sharing on Facebook and tagging. But Google Analytics doesn't have a default bucket or channel for paid social.
Right.
And so what I recommend doing is setting your medium to paid social. And if you put a plus sign in between paid and social, it'll show up as 2 words in your Google Analytics account. So that plus sign renders as a space. And then creating a custom channel that says, okay, anything that comes from the medium of paid social, put this into our custom paid social channel.
And you create the custom channel within Analytics?
Yes. Yeah. And I have a really comprehensive guide on channels as well. So I'll send you the link for that. But yeah, customizing those channels are really, really important. So like, for example, I have Google Docs that I've shared with marketers. I created a custom channel for my Google Docs. I created a custom channel for my templates. I have an analytics audit template and a site audit template, and all of that traffic. I have tons of links to my site, obviously, and that would have all shown up as direct, but right. I tag it so that it shows up. The medium is templates, and then I have a custom channel that says anything that comes from the medium of template, put this in my template channel. And it's easy to get tied up with all the terminology. But so with paid social, I definitely recommend using a custom medium and then creating a custom channel.
Excellent. And if you do write that article, send it to me after and I'll add it to the show notes afterwards.
Okay.
It's a great tip. Hey everyone. So I hope you enjoyed that interview with Annie Cushing. She did in fact write that article about proper campaign tagging. It's called How to Track Social Ads in Google Analytics, which you can find on her blog at annielytics.com, ANNIELYTICS.com. Or you can find all of the links and resources that were mentioned in this show at evolvingseo.com/wire, where we post show notes from all of the episodes. So I hope you found this episode valuable, and I will see you next time on Experts on the Wire. Such good music.